Hi. So we have learned three different ways to solve systems. The first one was by graphing, the second one was by substitution, and the third one was by elimination. Elimination is also called linear combination. Elimination can be done with or without multiplication according on the problem. So sometimes you may see it listed as four methods, since technically elimination can be done with and without multiplication. But elimination is really just one method, but you might see a clarification over to the side. Why am I repeating this? Well, today we're going to be looking at how do I know when to use which method? Which method is best in certain situations? It is possible that on the EOC, on our upcoming test, on our common assessment from the district, that you are asked which method is used the best in this situation, or which method would be best to use in this situation. Excuse me. So I'm going to give you some tips and tricks on when is it best to use which method. So, when is it best to use the graphing method? First of all, if you already have a graph, it's definitely best to use the graphing method. If they've already put the lines on a graph for you, go ahead, use graphing. There's no need to do substitution or elimination. Unless when you look at that graph, the answer is a decimal or a fraction. If it's in Desmos, it'll tell you what that decimal or fraction is. If it's by hand or in a picture, it may not tell you what that is. In that case, you may have to use another method. But if it's already graphed and it falls on a pretty point, then definitely go with the graphing method. If nothing else, graphing can always tell you how many solutions there are, even if you can't see which one is best. Another time that graphing is good to use if they are both in slope-intercept form with easy numbers like y equals 1/2 plus 2 and y equals 3x plus 1. Those are really small numbers that you can feasibly graph. If they're both in slope-intercept form, it's also pretty easy to use substitution. So substitution or graphing in that case would work. Graphing is normally our last method. We normally choose substitution or elimination unless we have a Desmos calculator. So when should I use substitution? You should use substitution when one variable is already solved for. For instance, if I have 2x plus 3y equals 4 and y equals 2 minus 5x. In this case, substitution would be best because a variable is already solved for. I can take what it's equal to and substitute it into the other equation. Elimination would not be so great here because the like terms are not in columns. We could move them around, but even if we do, we don't have any matching coefficients. So by doing elimination, even if that's your favorite method, you're creating more work. Can you still do elimination? Of course you can. Another time you might want to use substitution is if a variable has a coefficient of 1. So for instance, if I have x plus 3y equals 7 and 2y equals 5x plus 9. In this case, substitution would probably be the best because we could easily solve for x. We wouldn't want to use elimination here because they're not in columns. We'd have to rearrange it and then we would have to use multiplication there. So since this has a coefficient of 1, this would be a good time to use substitution. Again, you could use elimination, but it is best probably for substitution. Also, if you have both equations already solved for a variable, which kind of goes up here with this one, like if I had x equals 5x minus 2 and x equals, excuse me, that should be a y. I don't know why I put that there. X equals 1/2 y plus 7. In that case, substitution would be best as well because they're both already solved for x. You could rearrange it for elimination and subtract to get rid of the x's, but substitution would probably be faster there. When is it best to use elimination? First of all, when they are the like terms are in columns. it's good to use that. So maybe 2x plus 3y equals 5 and 4x minus 7y equals 10. They're in columns. Yes, you'd have to multiply there, but they're already in the columns for you. We normally use elimination when they're both in standard form or close to standard form. Another time is when you have matching coefficients for like terms. And I need to look up and see if I spell coefficients correctly, but you know what word I'm talking about. So for instance, if I had 2x equals 5y minus 3 and 2x plus 4y equals 7, no, they're not in columns, but it wouldn't be very difficult to subtract 5y from both sides and get them in columns, and I already have this matching coefficient. So if they're all in columns, or if there's a match, elimination is very quick to use. If they're in columns and there's not a match, like up here, it's very quick to multiply through. If it doesn't fall into any of these nicely, then you need to pick the method that is easiest for you. But there are times when it is clearly best to use substitution, like if a variable is already solved for here. There are times when it is clearly best to use elimination when they're already in columns, especially if when they are in columns, they have a matching coefficient. So there are going to be times that you're asked which is best to use, and you might even be asked, why is that the best method? So be prepared to defend your answer. Also know that sometimes there's not a best method. Sometimes it's just a really messy problem and you just have to pick one and roll with it. That is not often the case. Normally when we give you these, especially on a test, we pick one that we know has a good method to roll with, but in real life, it's not always really pretty. All right, stay tuned for the next video where I go over word problems. How exciting.